Hello, welcome to the tutorial for PSOSM. In this tutorial, we'll be looking at some of the essential libraries in Python that we need for this course. Some of the ones that we are dealing with in this tutorial are NumPy, Pandas, and Matplotlib. Before we come to that, so in the last tutorial about Python, we had seen how we can interact with Python in the interpreter, or we can execute a script in terminal, right? So for especially for data analysis purposes, there is another popularly used tool for writing code and analysis in Python, and that is called Jupyter Notebooks or Jupyter Lab, right? So they provide this kind of an interface where you can write your documentation, or you can write your piece of code and execute, right? So this has a sort of an interpreter style, but it is not exactly interpreter, but somewhere in between, right? So you can there are certain advantages of using this, especially when you are writing a demo code, or when you are creating writing equations or visualization, or writing documentation along with your code, right? So this is shareable. You can share this with somebody in your team, and it is quite useful that way, right? So first of all, before we get to that, let me cover the installation part of it. So this Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook can be installed using pip or conda, as we discussed in the last tutorial. Both of these are Python package managers, right? So these are simple commands: pip install Jupyter Lab, pip install Notebook, and similar commands for conda, right? Now comes okay, once you have installed this, how do you start this, right? So for that, you have to open your terminal, and in the terminal you can just type Jupyter space lab, right? So what it does is it automatically opens your default browser and opens this kind of an interface. Similarly, if you want to use Jupyter Notebook, the command is pretty simple. Jupyter Notebook, right? And you have to just press enter. Yeah, Jupyter Notebook or Jupyter Lab, and just press enter. And Jupyter Notebook has a different sort of an interface, and it looks something like this, right? Where you can open your notebook, any IPyNB notebook. So the notebooks that you use in Jupyter have an extension of IPyNB, right? And so that you can open that file extension in either Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook, right? And it looks something like this, right? So there is the interface that you have in Jupyter Lab is a bit different from that you have in Jupyter Notebook, but the functionality essentially remains the same, right? But let's say you don't want the browser to be opened automatically, then there are certain then there is a certain variation where you can just say Jupyter Lab space hyphen no hyphen browser, right? So hyphen no hyphen browser, right? So what it will do is it will not open the browser by default, but it will have an output something like this, right? Once you enter, when you press enter, it shows something like this kind of an output, and it gives you a URL, right? So you can just copy this and paste it in your browser address bar, and it will just open up, right? So it will open up an interface like this, right? So just to recap, you have two options. You just say Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook, or you also have the option of giving an additional argument saying no browser, so that the browser doesn't get opened automatically. You can open it by just copying the address and pasting it in the address bar, right? So this is about Jupyter. So this is about the installation of Jupyter. What it does is it allows, the fundamental units in this are cells, right? So for example, this is a cell where I have written markdown script, right, for this text, and I just enter, and it renders that, right? So you can make a cell a markdown, or you can make a cell a code or anything, right? So in this Jupyter Lab, you can actually open any text files or any CSV files that you might have, right? So it will open just another tab, right? So also it has certain other panes where you can look at your file directory, where you can open a new, let's say if you click on this, it allows you to open a new notebook, right? So if I just click on it, yeah, it opens a new notebook and you can save it and work from there, right? And so you can see that the new file is created here, and you can create a new folder and so on and so forth, right? So I let you to explore what are the few more integrate details of Jupyter, but this is a quite easy and handy tool. I don't think that you would have too much trouble figuring this out. Yeah, right. So let's get to the next step. So the first thing, before we go about dealing with these libraries, first things first is about the installation, and the commands are pretty simple. Pip install numpy, pip install pandas, pip install matplotlib, right? Command for your particular system might be a bit different. It might be pip3, so be careful about that. If you're not finding pip, then you can try with pip3, and the commands would be similar for the package managers like Conda. Right? You can just search those libraries and you will get the necessary commands, but these are simple installations, nothing too big about it. Right, so let's get into today we are dealing with NumPy, Pandas and Matplotlib. Let's get into the first one today. NumPy is essentially a library which allows you to do these numerical computations in a much more quicker way, right? So it has NumPy has these data structures that allows you to store matrices, multi-dimensional matrices. These are called arrays, and it also has certain functionalities which are much more quicker than your, let's say, list operations, right? So if you have a list and if you want to find sum of all the numbers in that list, you can do that with Python vanilla list, and you can do with NumPy. The advantage with NumPy is that it will be much more faster, it will be quicker, right? And it is memory efficient when you're dealing with large data sets and multi-dimensionals or large matrices or large arrays. It is quite efficient on the memory, right? So for importing the NumPy, you just have to type this import NumPy as np, or you can skip np, but usually np is better because you don't want to write NumPy every time, right? So this is how you define a normal list in Python, right? It is as simple as that. And similarly, for defining array, for defining a NumPy array, you just say np.array and you can enclose a list within it, right? Right, and you can also find the type of you can have this indexing with, there are few more cells about indexing, but this indexing is something similar to what you would have seen in list. For accessing the first element in this array, you just say a of 0, right? And all the elements in this array have different data types: int 64, float 16, float 32, float 64, something like that, right? Or strings, right? It can store multiple types of objects, right? But if you want to find what is the exact data type, you can just, and this is a familiar command, type of a of 0, and it says numpy.int16, right? So, and also if you can declare your float points in addition to the integers that we have seen earlier. But if you want to use a particular data type, then you can also say, you can also mention that, right? Float 32 or float 16. Yeah. Pretty straightforward. You can see that all this is defined with float 32. I think by default you will get a float 64. I think this is what we have demonstrated in the cell here. Right. So what you can see is that for each of the cells, for executing this cell, one option that you have is you can go and click on this. Right. You can select multiple cells and click on run. They will be executed sequentially. Right. But another option is that you just select that cell and press on shift and enter. Shift enter. Right. Shift enter would also execute that cell, right? So you can choose which cells to execute and so on and so forth, right? One more thing is that you can use list comprehensions, like we would have seen for so the range from I to I plus 3 would create essentially elements right from I to I plus 3, right? And you're creating that for 3 integers, right? You're doing this in a loop, right? So let's execute it and let's see how A looks like, right? So I'll insert another cell above and I'll execute it, right? And you can say that a 3 by 3 matrix, 3 by 3 array is formed, right? So if you want to look at the shape of this, you can also print a dot shape. What it shows is shows the shape of the array, right? Whether it's a 3 by 3 matrix or a 2 by 3 matrix or whatever, right? So yeah, you can we'll see few more ways of how you can create NumPy arrays and all of that here, right? As I said, so if you remember on the top we had imported NumPy as NP, right? So that's why you are in every command you can see NP dot array or NP dot zeros or whatever. If you don't do this, if you just type import NumPy, then you have to say NumPy dot array, right? So just to simplify that, you are using NP here, right? So yeah, NumPy has some built-in functions like np.zeros and np.ones. For creating, you just mention the size and it will create an array of that size with either zeros or with ones, right? And full np.full is another, so you're creating a 9 by 9 matrix and every element is 1001. So another function that you would have seen in list comprehension is creating an array using the range function, and you say that okay, what this will do is it'll between 1 and 10 with an interval of 2 it will create elements, right? So for I in range of 1 comma 10 starting from 1 ending at 10 with a gap of 2. So all the odd numbers are generated between 1 and 10. Right. Similarly, you have a function in NumPy called arrange, np.arrange, starting from 0, ending at 20, and create and store every fifth element, right? So you have 0, 5, 10, and 15 stored. And so always remember the last element is not taken into account, right? So if it is 0 to n, the consideration will be 0 to n minus 1, right? So this is not the closed bracket, this is an open bracket. Okay. So another function would be linspace, np.linspace. What it would do is that between the starting and the end point, it will create 20 unique points, right? So I am saying that starting from 0 to 150, give me return 20 elements which are uniformly spaced, right? So distance between 0 to 7 and 7.89 and distance from 7.89 to 15.78 would be uniform, right? And you can change this. So if you change this to 30, it will return 30 elements ranging from 1 to 150 which are uniformly spaced. Another function is for creating random arrays. So np.random.random, and you are just mentioning the size of the array here. It will return array of randomly generated numerals, right? And if you look at the documentation of np.random.random, you can also understand based on which distribution are these matrices or arrays constructed, right? So I leave it up to you to go and figure this out. Right. So for figuring out the documentation, you can just go to numpy.org/doc. So that will have a list of all the functions and their documentation. Right. So they will provide you with all the necessary details. right? So once you have created an NP array, you can see that these are floats, right? These are not integers, right? So once you can typecast them as integer as well. So you are just saying a as type int 16. So you can see that all of them are rounded to 0, right? Because everything is between 0 and 1. Right. So one more function is np.i. It will create a diagonal matrix, and you are saying, since this is a square matrix, you just mention one dimension, right? So this is a 5 by 5 matrix, right? So in this function, what you can see is that you are generating random integer, right? np.random provides you with certain functions for generating random matrices, and in the above cells we saw about creating a random array. Here we are generating you are generating same matrices but with random integers, right? So what this function will do is, this line of code will do is, it will create 20 elements and they'll be randomly generated between 1 to 150, right? So again, a typecasting function. So here you can see that you have generated integers, but you are casting them as float 32. You are changing the data type as float 32, right? So in the above cell we saw that everything was rounded to 0 because you were converting floats to integers, but here you are doing the other way around. You are converting integers to floats. Although the data type gets converted to float 32, the values, since it is integers values remains the same, right? So there is no change, but the data type is changed, right? Let's go to the next section where we deep dive into some of the attributes of the arrays, right? So this is a familiar function that we have seen. You can create a random array of size. It's a 3-dimensional array of 3 cross 6 cross 4, right? So if you can just print the array by just saying by just typing x and executing that cell, so it will show the complete array. So you can say that there are 3. So the first dimension is 3. So you have 3 matrices, and then there is 6, right? So you have 6 rows by 4 columns. 6 rows by 4 columns. So it's a 3-dimensional array. So if you want to find out the shape of any array, you just say x.shape. This is something that we have seen. x.n dimension will give you how many dimensions it has. So it's a 3-dimensional array, so it has 3 dimensions, so it will remain the same. So if you give a 2-dimensional array, it will return x.n dim will be equal to 2. Right? x.size will give you the total number of elements in this array. Right? So it is 3 cross 6 cross 4. So if you type x.size, it will count all the elements present in this, which amounts to 72. Right? And if you x.dtype will return the data type of this array. Right? Next thing is something that we have seen earlier in one of the codes, but array indexing is something that is useful for understanding how you can access the whole array or subset of an array and so on and so forth, right? Slices of an array. So array indexing is quite useful in that sense, right? So np.linspace, as I said, it will create elements from 0 to 1. It will create 5 elements which are linearly spaced, equally spaced. Right. So once you have created an array, you can see here that you can access the first element by saying x square bracket 0. This is something similar to what you have seen in list. If you want to access the first element of a list, you can still say x of x over square bracket 0, right? So if you want to access the fourth element, so one thing that you need to be careful, as in the case of list, similarly here also, they start from 0. The indexing starts from 0, right? So when you're typing x of 3, you are actually accessing the fourth element in the array, right? So 0.75 is the fourth element, so that's why. So if you access, as we see here, this x has only 5 elements. If you go beyond that, if you try to access an index that doesn't exist greater than the size of the array, it'll raise an array. It'll raise an exception. Sorry, it'll raise an exception, index error, right? Right. So this was from in this array. If you want to go from left to right, so it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So if you want to go from back, you have -1. So if you want to access the last element in this, you can just say x of -1. Or if you want to access the second from the last, you can just say x of minus 2, right? So the negative indexing will work from back, right? So I'll just repeat this: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you're coming from back, this is minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, minus 5, right? Okay. Next, let's look at indexing when you are working with multi-dimensional arrays, right? So what we have seen above was only it was only a vector, right? It was only a one-dimensional array. But when you're working with 2 by 2 arrays, or higher than that, right? 3-dimensional arrays or 2-dimensional arrays, the indexing would be similar in spirit, but a bit different, right? It'd be a bit different because you have other dimensions also to take care of, right? So here we have generated a random 3 by 3 array, and you can access, if you say x of 0, you get the first row, right? So if you would say x of 1, you get the second row, right? But if you specify both the dimensions, for a 2-dimensional array, if you specify both the dimensions, you can get the exact element out of it, right? So there are two ways to do that. You can say x of 0 comma 2, or you can say x of 0 and 2 in another separate brackets. So again, a simple examples doing the same, no different. Right, so now we will cover the array slicing portion, where here we are defining a list with all the numbers ranging from 0 to 50, and using the syntax like this, what we can do is select every second element in the list, right? So only the even numbers would be selected. Now the same array, the same slicing operations can be done for a NumPy array as well. Let's see how we do that. Here we are defining a simple unidimensional array with 10 elements, right? So when we say x square brackets colon 5, what we are saying that, okay, select till the 5th element, right? So one thing that we need to be careful about is the indexing. So in NumPy arrays, as we already saw, as list, indexing starts from 0, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So when we say when we are defining the upper limit, right? So to say, when we say that we need till 5th element, what is going to do, what is going to get selected is 0 to 4, right? So if I say till n, it is going to select all the elements till ln minus 1, right? All the elements preceding n, right? Similarly, but if we say select all the elements from 5 onwards, then it's going to select 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th, right? You can verify that here, right? So the point here is to be careful about the indexing. And here we are saying that 4 to select all the elements starting at index 4 and the elements occurring till index 7, right? So 4th, 5th and 6th will be selected. 4th, 5th and 6th will be selected. Again, this is syntax that we have already seen. It is going to select all the even indexed numbers, 0th index, 2nd index, 4th index, so on and so forth. So another operation would be something like this, where we say starting from 3rd, ending at 8, and pick every second element, right? Again, 8. So when we are saying index 8, all the elements till index 7 would be considered, right? The last one would be not considered. And we are doing the same thing in reverse, right? So starting from 8, ending at 3, we are saying every second element. Minus 2 because we are traversing from right to left, right? You can compare this with the original array that is on the top, and you can satisfy yourself that the correct index are selected. Now all of these slicing operations were for unidirectional arrays, unidimensional arrays, sorry. The same thing could be done for multi-dimensional arrays as well, right? So we have here a 2 by 2 array, and we can mention the slices on both the axes, right? So you have dimension 0 and you have dimension 1, right? So 1, 2, 3 would select row number 1 and 2, and 1 to 4 on axis 1, that is the columns, it will select all the columns from 1, 2 and 3, 1, 2 and 3, right? So that is why you have selected this subset 5, 6, 7, 7, 8, 9. and you can change this depending on what slice you want to pick, right? So again, this in a multi-dimensional array, you're going to specify slices in all the dimensions, right? So when you have not mentioned any integer on a particular axis, you are just saying colon, it will select all the elements in that axis, right? So this is dimension 0, so it will select all that is the rows, right? These are the rows. So when I've just specified colon, it will select all the rows, right? And colon 2 will say that I'll select every second column, right? So the 0th column, the second column, and the third, and 0th column, second column, and the I think this is the 6th column, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4th column, sorry. Right. And the same kind of indexing can be done with the negative indices as well. So it will reverse that particular dimension. So you have colon -1, so all the rows are reversed, right? Initially it was 2 4 6 9, now it is reversed 9 6 4 2, right? And all the columns are selected. You have not sliced anything on the columns axis, right? So this is about the slicing of arrays. Now comes to the concatenation of different arrays. Let's say you have 2 or 3 arrays that you want to handle, and you want to join them in there are different functions that allow you to do that. NP concatenate is one of them, right? So you have two unidimensional arrays, and when you say concatenate, y is added at the end of x. So 1 2 3 and 3 2 1, right? You have array 1 2 3, and the second array is 3 2 1. When you concatenate both of them, you have 1 2 3 and 3 2 1. Similarly, you can concatenate arrays that are of multiple dimensions as well, right? So you have defined a 2 by 2 by 3. So this is a 2 by 3 array, and you can concatenate that array with itself, right? And you have to mention the axis. On which axis do you want to merge, right? So you can say 1 2 3 4 5 6. So this second x can be concatenated in this below this, or it can be concatenated adjacent to this, right? So that can be selected by that can be specifically mentioned by giving the axis argument. So axis 0 would concatenate on axis 0. This is axis 0, right? So it will add 2 more rows. But if you want to add on the column side, you have to say axis 1. So you can say that the second x is added on the columns axis, right? So you had 2 by 3. When you are concatenated on axis 0, you would end up with 4 by 3 matrix. But when you are concatenating them on the columns axis, you will end up with 2 by 6. Right? I will have another look at this, and it will be much more easier to understand. Right. Another thing that you could do for concatenating is something called stacking, right? So you have two functions, vstack and hstack. They stand for vertical stacking and horizontal stacking, right? So you had you have two arrays here. One is a unidirectional array with 3 elements, and another is a 2 by 3 matrix, right? So what you can do is you can stack this vertically, saying that 1 2 3 can be stacked over this or below this, and that is a vstack, right? Mind you, when you're using this vstack or hstack, you have to be careful about the dimensions, right? So if I'm stacking x over or below y, the dimensions of x have that particular dimension of x, the vertical dimension, the dimension 0 has to match. Similarly, you can do vertical stacking in the matrix y. You can say that you have a 2 by 3 matrix. So if you want to add a 4th column, you can add that by using hstack, right? So I am defining another column here, 99 99, and I can stack that by using this hstack function, right? So when you are going through this exercise, verify what is the so when you are using vstack, you stacked x over y, right? And when you are doing hstack, you were doing that between y and z matrices, right? So verify what were the dimensions of this, right? And if you change those dimensions, do these vstack and hstack still work, right? The point here is that the dimensions on the dimension on which this stacking is taking place, those dimensions have to match in a certain manner. Next comes the splitting of arrays. There you have again you have functions like reshape, vsplit, and headsplit, right? So let's say you have what this will do. It is np.arrange16. It will generate a unidimensional array with 16 elements, right? So now the shape would be 1,16, let's say. Now you can reshape that as a 4x4 matrix, right? So you can say that that is reshaped as 0 to 15, but in a 4x4 matrix shape. That is what reshape does. It will take a particular array and it can reshape into whatever arguments that you can give. Again, you can use vsplit to get a upper or a lower matrix, right? It will split on a axis 0, right? And headsplit will do the same on a horizontal axis, right? Now come the functions that we can, universal function that can be used with NumPy. As we said in the beginning of this tutorial, that now advantage of using NumPy library is that it does certain things in a very speedy manner, right? So let's verify that for ourselves for a second, right? So what we are doing is we are generating an array, a random integer array, right? And it will have 5 elements. What we want to do is we want to calculate the reciprocals of all of these elements, right? So one thing that you can do is you can go through this array one by one and calculate the reciprocals, right? So that is what this function is doing, compute underscore reciprocals. It is doing the same thing. It is looping through the elements in that array and it is computing the reciprocals, right? So let's see whether which one is faster, right? So this magic command percentage time it will, what it does is that while executing that particular command, it will calculate what was the time taken to execute that command, right? So you have a 5 element array. You are calculating reciprocal by looping through each of those elements, right? And you can time it. So it took around 20.2 microseconds, right? But for calculating the reciprocals, instead of using this elaborate function, what you can do is you can just simply say 1 divided by x, right? So it will do the element wise reciprocal operation automatically, right? And you can see the speed difference, 1.74 microseconds, right? So one can argue that okay, the difference between these microseconds is not very huge, right? It is still microseconds. The difference is still microseconds, around 90 microseconds, let's say, which is not very huge because it's still in microseconds. Now we were doing these operations on the 5 element array. Now if you were to do this on a much larger array, let's say with 1000 elements, the time difference would be noticeable, right? If you calculate of the reciprocals for a 1000 element array by looping through that array one by one, it takes around 3.41 seconds. But if you were to do this just by using this function 1 divided by the array, it will take much lesser time, right? You can again execute this and compare the timings, but this timings will change depending on your hardware as well, right? If your hardware is fast, the processor is fast, then it will take lesser time. The timings might vary, but this difference would be noticeable, right? Similarly, if you want to divide an array by a scalar, you divide all the elements in that array by a scalar, you can do that by just mentioning array divided by the scalar, right? Similarly, you can divide an array by an array, so element wise division will also be possible, right? Now look at some of the arithmetic operations like adding two arrays or subtracting two arrays or multiplicating two arrays, right? And the syntax is pretty simple: x plus y, x minus y, x multiplied by y. These are element wise operations, and double asterisk means that they are raised to the power, right? So the x to the power x to the power y means that this 2 to the power 12, right? So that will amount to 4796. All of these are element wise operations. Few other math operations, like you can calculate sine, cos, tan, and all of these mathematical computations, and you just have to call np dot sine on that particular array. So the function will be applied to all the elements in that array, and the values will be calculated, right? So you have what your input was a three element array, and for each of those elements the sine, cos, tan, and all of those were calculated and outputted here, right? Okay, now this matrix multiplication, above when we did this, when we say x into y, it was a element wise multiplication. But if you want to do a proper matrix multiplication, you can do that by using this function called matmul. Few more statistical operations, operations like sum, max, min, and all of this can be again called using the NP library. And again, there is as we argued above, there is an advantage of using this np.sum over the normal sum that comes with Python. The sum, the np.sum function, this will be much more quicker than a vanilla sum that you get with Python, right? So the speed difference is there for you to see, right? So what it did here is that over a large array, it calculated the sum of all the elements, right? Similarly, you can find out minimum and maximum, again np.min, np.max, and you can see there is a difference in the speeds here as well, right? Again, you can what you can do, this sum operations on the above syntax. What we did was that we called np.sum on a large array, so it calculated sum of all the elements. Similarly, you can also do something like this on a array object. M is an array object, it is a 3x4 matrix. By saying m.sum, it will still calculate the sum of all the elements, right? The syntax is a bit different, but the functionality is essentially the same, right? Another thing is that if you want to calculate sum on a particular axis, right, you can also do that. So you can mention the axis, right? So axis 0 means that I am flattening it on the rows. So this you will get a column wise sum, right? And you mention, when you mention axis is equal to 1, you will get a row wise sum, right? You can do it. Again, other statistical operations like mean of m, standard deviation of m, and all of that can still be calculated. I think what argmin and argmax will do is that they'll give you the position of the minimum and the maximum element in the array.